It's your weekly dose of confessions.
Hello and welcome to our Confessions podcast. This week's concise collection of terrible tales. Check out the alliteration on this. A cassette catastrophe, some underhand underwear usage, toilet trauma, very good, and rock royalties rebuttal, 10 out of 10. Here it all is. This is Radio 2 and this is another drive time confession which Rebecca started.
Don't blame me.
Well, it starts with you, as so many of these confessions do.
Indeed.
Obviously, a lot of them don't get to
done,
air.
Rebecca? No.
Some of them, you know, we met Rebecca at school, and then we just know it's not going to make it to air.
Uh-oh.
This is from Nicholas. Thank you, Nicholas. Dear everyone and everything that is holy, says Nicholas. Sister Rebecca's recent suggestion that buying pants and socks is a good thing as an indication that the recession might be over made me laugh out loud. Just remind us what that story was, because it's a strange one.
Well, I was saying it's called an alternative indicator by economists, and it basically says when people generally start buying new pants, it means that they feel more confident about the economy.
Anyway, so Nicholas says, made me laugh out loud. This was embarrassing as I was driving with company at the time and I couldn't explain to them the reason for my surprising outburst, but Rebecca's story triggered a reflex reaction in me to a confession which needs telling 5 years after the event. My elder brother Gavin is a successful accountant and has run his own company for quite a few years. He's a good bloke normally, though he might confess to the hair dye and rubber ring story one day, and is good to his family and staff. He has a good house, car, that kind of thing, and he's one of those people who, because of all this success, is impossible to buy presents for. He has everything he wants, really, so Christmas and birthdays tend to be a succession of token presents just to let him know that we haven't forgotten him. He's fine with this and is slightly more generous to us, the rest of his family, as we are considerably less flush than he is. So his 39th birthday, I think, came round, and I bought him socks and pants, as I often have in the past. I realise that in black and white this sounds a bit stingy, but this is the truth of it. I went to a nice store and bought a pack of 5 pairs of designer socks and a pack of 3 designer pants. The bag lay in my room for a few days prior to his birthday while I got on with my life. Then 2 days before his big day, I got a call from some workmates wanting me to go out for a meal. It was a last-minute affair, but they were good people and some young ladies were apparently going to be in attendance. Could I be at the local gastropub in 30 minutes? Well, I said yes and then realised that I had to be quick, so I jumped in the shower and ran to get dressed. It was then while toweling myself down that I realised I had no clean socks. Or indeed clean pants. Now, I realise that there are many men listening. Hello, brother Matt, says Nicholas, who would have been quite content to just put on the same items that they just discarded. But I'm afraid I'm not one of them. Tonight I needed freshness. I found an ironed shirt and some clean trousers, and I'm afraid to say, with only a nanosecond's worth of hesitation, I peeled the sticky tape off the designer sock bundle and removed the top pair, black with a red stripe, and put them on. Next I did the same with the pants. The plastic Perspex container was delicately prized apart, and a fine pair of boxer briefs was removed. The box-fresh socks and undergarment fitted fine, and I was ready for the rest of my knock-em-dead outfit. Feeling pretty good and snug, I set out for my night out. Nicholas continues, I can't remember if I was planning to buy more pants and socks to make up for my use of Gavin's present, but anyway, the day of his birthday arrived and I was meeting for lunch. So with no time left for a more sanitary option, I found the discarded and unwashed socks and underpants, placed them back in the middle of the bundle, hoping that he wouldn't notice that they were the only socks without a stitch holding them together. The pants were easier. I put them in the middle of the pack and carefully replaced the designer sticker to make it look untouched by a human hand. Really, no one would have known. And yes, I did make a quick check. Anyway, we met for lunch and I handed over the present and he unwrapped them there and then. We both laughed, but I think I laughed louder and longer. with more than a hint of nervousness. I've never actually got round to telling him that somewhere in his drawer he has, or probably had, second-hand pants and socks. But he'll know now. He's probably done worse to me, so I don't really feel too bad. But for family unity, I should apologise to his lovely wife, Colleen, who might take this worse than Gavin, with her being the emotional Irish type. Yours...
Really?
Yours humbly, Nicholas, who had bought a very a reasonable present, I suppose, used them, replaced them, and hasn't mentioned it. And it's your story, Sister Rebecca. You take the rap for this one.
I'm not taking the rap for this. I want to know what boxer briefs are, because I have no idea what that means.
Well, they're kind of... It's like boxer...
Are they just brief?
Boxer shorts.
Okay, fine. Thank you for that. It's a bit of a weird one. I think if I'd
She's
done
our
this...
underwear correspondent here asks how she knows most...
Any questions about underwear, I am your woman.
If I had done this, I mean, I can imagine myself doing this, but then I wouldn't give the pants and the socks to my brother or sister, but I can easily imagine taking them out of the packet and doing that. The thing is, it's a bit disgusting, but he is his brother, you know? So kind of, that does make it better. If it was somebody not related to
it's
him by
okay, it
blood,
doesn't...
well,
right.
it kind of does, you know? It sort of does,
it's perfectly
actually.
acceptable then. Yeah.
So I think I'm going to forgive you for that, Nicholas.
Nicely done, Mother Superior.
Well, honestly, I can't... I mean, who around this assembled table would do that? Who here would want to wear a pair of pants?
Well, you wouldn't want to.
That
but
someone had already worn. Yeah, but I mean, that's the moral dilemma, isn't it? Not knowing. And actually, I think it's probably one of the most disgusting things I've ever heard. I think it's awful that
what
somebody...
a sheltered life you've
Yes,
led.
I have. I mean, I know blokes on the whole don't mind wearing old, putting back... I mean, I think women, Rebecca, it was true to say, I have a fresh pair on every day. Do you? She's non-committal. Of course you put a fresh pair of underpants on every day. Blokes don't do that, do they?
Yes.
No, you don't.
Yes, they do.
No.
Oh, I do.
So I think it's disgusting. I cannot forgive you. I think it's awful. But I would say, just as a little PS, I think socks and pants are a great present. Anyway, but you're not forgiven.
So it's all down to you, Brother Matthew.
Well, I may well have the morals of a sewer rat, but I can't
and the
really
hygienic
see...
standards also.
Yes, indeed, yes. But I can't really see what he's done wrong. I mean, I get the feeling that because he's going out for this night out...
He's worn pants and then given them to his brother.
Yes, but he's going out and he wants to feel good and he wants to feel a bit naughty as well. I get the feeling he wants to feel a bit saucy and naughty with these young ladies coming to this gastropub.
What, by wearing socks and pants?
I think he gives off the aura of being a bit saucy and a bit naughty by wearing pants that he shouldn't be. And so well done to you, sir, and even for then giving it to your loaded brother, who frankly has got everything anyway. He's going to be fine. I was with you all the way. I was definitely going to forgive you right up until the point where you labelled his wife the emotional Irish type, and which I decided not to forgive you. You're not forgiven for that. For that, for using the pants is fine, but the emotional Irish type, no.
People's verdict, please, on 88-291, and we might get... it's more sort of underwear and socks. Confessions. Stuff you've given your brother.
Yeah?
I don't know.
Pants,
maybe
definitely.
there's not a lot to go from there. OK, so your verdict then, the people's verdict is due. It's 88-291. Radio 2, and this is another drive time confession. You can send yours, bbc.co.uk/Radio 2. Look for the drive time pages, Matt.
OK.
Look for the confessions section.
Yep.
Read all about them, and then send in yours. This from David. Dear Father Simon, Mother Superior, and the confessional siblings, my confession dates back to the late 80s. Back then, I was a young and inexperienced immigration officer working at one of London's major airports. Importantly, I was, and still am, hugely into rock. I liked bands of all rock persuasions, including The Mission and The Cult.
Oh, yeah.
Which I mentioned merely to carry favour with Brother Matt and Dr. Mosh, if he happens to be passing as well. But I was also a fan of a host of poodle-permed glam rock bands. One of my favourites at the time was the American band Poison. What do we know about Poison?
They did Every Rose Has Its Thorn.
And
nothing else.
Wow. On the day my sin took place, I was at work with the immigration hall, and it was very busy. When non-European passengers arrived, my job was to find out what they planned to do in the UK and decide whether or not they were allowed to do it. If I had doubts about someone, I had the power to detain them, search their belongings, and if necessary, send them back from whence they came. But mostly, I spent my time welcoming tourists and businessmen to Britain and wishing them a nice day. Well, this morning, the usual line worked their way through our stalls, and I found my next customer. And he was standing right in front of me, and I did the classic comedy double take. I recognised that face and the long, permed blonde highlights. I looked again, but there was absolutely no doubt. Standing before me was none other than Bret Michaels.
Out of Poison.
Who, I hear you ask? Well, you collective can be forgiven, for that is, I'm sure, even in the late 80s, he wasn't exactly a household name, but I knew only too well. You see, Bret Michaels was none other than the lead singer of Poison. That's right. His unexpected appearance before me threw me out of my professional demeanour. I knew why he was here without needing to ask him, a much-awaited UK tour. I stammered out a few pleasantries whilst I flicked aimlessly through his passport. After a few moments, I regained some of my composure. Now, to gain entry to perform in the UK, Bret needed to have in his possession a work permit, which in those days took the unassuming form of a flimsy bit of paper. "Can I see your work permit, sir?" I asked, trying to sound professional. "Gee," Bret replied, "I don't know anything about that."
Oh, no. Oh, this is great. Is this going to be the whole thing now in that accent? Brilliant.
How does he talk then?
I don't know, but nothing like that.
My blood ran cold. If he didn't have a work permit, then we had a big problem. The only musicians who were allowed to perform without a work permit were those deemed to be, in quotes, artists of international repute, and I would go down in history as the person who wrecked Poison's UK tour. With a heavy heart, I asked him for the contact details of his manager in the UK and took Bret through to a small holding area where passengers waited whilst we make further inquiries. Going through to our back office, I phoned Poison's manager and explained about the missing work permit. The manager was as furious as I expected, but strangely not with me. "I don't bloomin' well believe it," he roared. "That guy is such a bloomin' idiot. He's always losing these things. We even stapled it in the back of his passport for him this time." Well, for the second time in a matter of minutes, my blood ran cold. Stapled in the back of the passport. Whilst continuing the conversation, I looked through the passport again, and sure enough, there was the work permit. In my earlier flustered state, I had missed the folded scrap of paper stapled inside the back cover. The relief at knowing that I wouldn't be hated by legions of British Poison fans was replaced almost immediately with thoughts of how I could resolve things without looking a complete idiot in front of one of my heroes. Without hesitation, I said to the manager, "Look, if you're telling me you did get a work permit, I'm sure I can sort this out." So I rang off and got to work. I removed the work permit from the back of the passport. I flattened it out and used the fax machine to make a copy. Then I attached this copy to the passport. I kept the original. We were supposed to do that anyway. And I stamped Bret's passport to allow him back into the UK to perform. I waited 5 minutes and then called the manager back. "It's okay," I said, "I've managed to get a copy of the permit." Technically, that's true. "Mr. Michaels will be free to go very shortly." The manager could not have been more grateful and thanked me profusely and repeatedly. He also told me in very blunt language what he would be saying to Bret the next time he saw him. I went back to the holding area and told the same story to Bret, who was just as grateful. As he left, he shook me warmly by the hand, patted me on the shoulder and said, "Thanks for helping me out."
Hot diggity dog.
It's a standard American accent. I stopped being an avid fan of Poison many years ago after their quite frankly poor Native Tongue album. But to this day, I cannot hear Every Rose Has Its Thorn or Unskinny Bop
Oh, yes, that was right.
without thinking of my encounter with their lead singer. So, collective, I seek forgiveness for my lack of professionalism. I also seek forgiveness for detaining Bret Michaels' one-time rock demigod, but mostly I seek forgiveness for the undeserved row that he got from his furious manager, which he would have avoided if I had not wanted to save my own blushes. David, the immigration officer, and the Bret Michaels Poison story. Could have been a disaster. Poison could have been kept out of this country, but no, they were allowed in because he was flexible.
He wouldn't have looked that unprofessional if he just said, "Oh, right, your manager just told me it's stapled to the back of your passport. Here it is, you're fine, you can go." I don't really get why...
You should have seen it. You should have seen it.
Really? But they're not normally stapled there, are they? I just don't get why he went through the charade of pretending that he'd managed to get hold of it somehow. But...
If you're saying he's a fool,
No,
call
I'm
him
not
a
saying that.
fool.
I'm just saying nothing bad happened as a result of this. OK, the guy might have been detained for a minute longer than he should have been.
He got shouted
but
at by
I
his
think
manager.
there's not a lot to forgive. So you are forgiven, David.
Sometimes, Sam and Mayo, you sound like the school teacher teacher telling off their kids.
Hurry up.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think there's much to forgive here, really. I mean, I can completely understand why you would get flustered in the presence of a rock god. Maybe he should have been refused entry on the grounds of his permed hair, but apart from that, I think it's fine what you did, going in, letting him go through. And do you know, the one thing I'm quite disappointed about is that they didn't say to you, or that you didn't ask them, if you could have had a couple of tickets for the concert for being so...
You would have thought that's the least you could... But maybe you're not allowed to do that. Maybe
that's corruption and all that. But it's a shame they didn't offer. So, yeah, I think you're totally forgiven.
I reckon we could get rock star confessions.
We've had a few, haven't we?
Immigration officer confessions. That might be quite interesting. What do you say, Brother Matthew?
Well, here's the thing, is when this immigration officer is asking Bret Michaels, you don't appear to have a work permit, why doesn't Bret Michaels go, oh, yes, there it is, it's in the back of my passport?
Because he says... I didn't know anything about that.
Because he's a bit thick. Bret Michaels isn't going to be troubling the people of Mensa anytime soon. He's not going to be troubling the mosh either, because frankly, Every Rose Has Its Thorn is a bit dull.
How do you know I'm not playing it next?
Yeah, no, you better not be playing. Are you playing that next?
Some Poison, actually. Let's have a bit of Poison.
Please.
I think we really should.
A little bit too much hairspray. Really?
I hope he's not.
Well, if he is listening, Brett, any time, sunshine, any time. So I am going to forgive.
Take him up, please.
I'm going to forgive because Brett's a bit thick. Yeah, well, he's not a bit thick. Let's not, mince words. He's very thick.
Okay, all right. So, people's verdict, please, and do it now. 88291, and now Poison.
Oh no.
Here's tonight's confession. It comes from Rob. Thank you very much indeed. You can confess online or send us an email, Dear Father Simon and the Forgiveness for. I wish to offload a burden that has been troubling me for almost 11 years. It concerns a time when my daughters, now 15 and 17, were much, much younger, and my life was a heady mixture of tears, laughter, bedtime stories, and sticking plasters on Gray's knees. But enough about the wife, says Rob.
Very funny.
This episode in my children's upbringing happened when my youngest was 4 years old, and we were undertaking the weekly outing to our local supermarket. Regular as clockwork, the morning's orange juice would filter through, and my daughter would need to go to the toilet. Dana was just old enough to go to the loo on her own, but not without Dad, who was made to wait outside until she'd finished, washed and dried her hands, and emerged from the forbidden zone that is the ladies' toilets. And so it was that one bright Saturday morning, we were standing by the pizzas, which, as you will know from this particular supermarket, is about as far away from the loos as you can possibly get, when Dana grabbed my hand and said, "Toilet, Daddy!" So I marched her to the door and she disappeared inside. Meanwhile, I stood outside trying not to look too awkward. It's that moment that all dads will recognise that although you have a good reason to be there, you never feel quite comfortable. A bit like when your wife goes shopping for underwear and you're pretending not to look at the lingerie pictures on the wall. But I digress. What's the matter, Mother Superior?
That's so true. Even I'm embarrassed in the lingerie department, actually.
I had been standing there for what seemed like an age when I heard the words that strike terror into a dad's heart. "Daddy, I'm finished!" Well, for the uninitiated, this is a euphemism for number substitution. We weren't dealing with number ones anymore. My wife was miles away, over the multicoloured sea of shelves, and I was alone in the moment. A good Samaritan appeared at the ladies' loo door. "Is that your little girl?" she asked with a smirk. "I'm afraid so," I replied. "Any suggestions?" She told me that she would stand guard while I went to sort my daughter out. I furtively crept into the forbidden zone, desperately hoping that no one would follow me in. But luck was having none of it, for in the next cubicle, the cubicle next to my daughter, was a pair of feet with what can only be described as a pair of bloomers around the ankles. If a mouse had been forced to wear slippers and take a vow of silence, then I was quieter as I tiptoed towards my daughter's cubicle. I pushed open the door and it swung back on its hinges without complaining. I mentally thanked the brave store workers who, according to the sign on the wall, checked the toilets every 30 seconds or so. It was at this point that my daughter saw me, grinned, and shouted in her loudest, most piercing voice, "It's all right, Daddy's here!" Well, the feet in the stall next to me visibly rose from the floor, taking the undergarments with them. It is virtually impossible to put a hand on your daughter's mouth while attending to her other needs at the same time. But needless to say, I would have put Usain Bolt to shame in the time it took for me to leave the place that no man should boldly go. My embarrassment was only further compounded by my wife's hysterical laughter when I eventually told her of my plight. So I seek forgiveness, therefore, O wondrous collective, for the embarrassment and bewilderment I must have caused to the unknown lady with the bloomers in the cubicle next door to us. And also, what a great word bloomers is. And also for the embarrassment that I'm going to cause Dana when she brings her first boyfriend home and I get my revenge. It's a classic tale. Fathers with daughters will recognise this particularly awkward moment. Not quite sure what else you could have done, Rob. Sounds pretty good to me. Let's see what Sister Rebecca makes of it.
Why didn't the mother go? This is
She's miles the other side. I think they're in a huge, multi-store, big supermarket thing. She's right over the other side.
Was that before mobile phones, presumably? Was it? I would have just called and said, get here now.
He was being a good dad.
He was being a good dad.
It's not the mother's job all the time. Is that what you're saying? It's always the mother's job?
No, not always, obviously. But if you're in a public place and it requires it involves going into the loo with them, then it's better if somebody, But obviously that wasn't possible in this case. I think it's very, very sweet, and I'm sure the lady with the bloomers will have thought it was sweet as well that the dad was there to help her daughter.
That instinctive reaction to hoist your feet up. I'm not sure what that changes.
I mean, dad with a daughter, no threat. So I think for that reason, Rob, you're entirely forgiven.
Awkward and embarrassing, but that's about it. What do you think, Mother Superior?
Well, I think we've all had stories of this type when our children were little. I mean, I know with my son, he went under the bank manager's desk once, and then there was another time when I took him in and I had a running commentary on that very situation about what was happening and how it was happening and how well or how not.
He used the bank manager's desk as a convenience.
Yes, no, he needed to go, and I was negotiating an overdraft, and he actually went, and I didn't get the overdraft. But anyway, yeah. So I think we've all been there, really, and I think it's tricky especially when you've got a child of the opposite sex to you. Rob, I think you're entirely forgiven, as I think the woman with the bloomers would have done as well.
What do you say, Brother Matthew?
Bloomers are just inherently funny, aren't they? Even the word. I mean, do they still sell bloomers? Are they? Is it not like 1970 sitcoms? They're not around anymore. I don't know.
Large pants.
Large pants around.
Large pants with big bits of elastic around the bottom, and I don't think you can get those
down to the knees.
Yeah.
Still very funny. And speaking as a man, ladies' loos are a source of horror. Never want to go anywhere near them in case there's a dreadful misunderstanding. And I can absolutely understand why this guy didn't want to go in and was as quiet as a mouse.
But he had to.
Let no one hear me.
Yeah, no one else is going to do it.
No one else is going to do it. Apparently, his wife is on the other side of Mars or whatever.
Whether you can forgive Rob's wife for basically preferring to shop.
I tell you what I don't forgive, though, is the idea that he feels it's all right to bring this up when she brings her first boyfriend home. What's that about? I don't want toilet stories when I come to see
Yes, you do.
No, I don't.
Oh, I brought the bank manager story out with Harry's girlfriends many times.
Yeah,
it's great. You have to get your revenge somehow.
So I'm going to forgive for that.
You wait till your son brings home an inappropriate girlfriend.
Oh, right. Toilet stories come out then, do they?
Anything is appropriate. Rob, thank you very much indeed for your story. We'll have the People's Verdict, very welcome, please, 88291. Not sure if we'll get any other similar, but I suppose embarrassed parents.
Oh, yes, please. Toilet stories are always good.
Plenty of those.
Yes, please.
And you can confess via the website or email confessions@bbc.co.uk. So it's 18 minutes to 6 o'clock, and we have a confession tonight which is sort of themed to the Radio Amnesty and the Listeners' Archive. Which has been very successful. Got an interesting list of some of the shows which they have discovered just on the basis of today, which I'll bring you later. But it's so in the spirit of cassettes and recording and tapes and all that business, we bring you this confession from Bridget. I've been listening to your confessions for some time now, Simon. I feel I must write to ask forgiveness for a terrible deed I did some years ago. I grew up in rural Ireland in the early 80s, and even though I had a great love of music, our access to the latest hit records was very limited. My pocket money would only just extend to a chart single every Saturday, but albums were reserved for Christmas and birthday presents, and even then we had to travel some 2 hours to Dublin to get them, as the local record shop only seemed to stock country and western music like Big Tom and the Mainliners, or Philomena Begley and her Rambling Men, and that wasn't my kind of thing. I went to a convent school in a nearby town and was delighted to be told by our history teacher that in order to carry out research for our history project, we were allowed to go on our own to the town library for a couple of hours. To my delight, whilst examining the very dull and dusty shelves for any relevant books, on the famine in Ireland 1845 to 1849 and its impact on the local community, I noticed a carousel containing an assortment of cassettes, which to my amazement could also be taken out on loan. I remember having a similar amazing moment, realising that the library actually lent you records.
I remember that very clearly and thinking how wonderful it was.
It was indeed.
Yeah.
However, my enthusiasm soon dimmed as I realised that apart from the obvious classical tapes, show tunes and a selection of Richard Clayderman, the only slightly pop tape was Barbra Streisand's Guilty. As she was duetting with Barry Gibb of the Bee Gees and I really liked Saturday Night Fever, I thought it was likely to be the most modern and something I could work out a routine to. So I very excitedly took it out on loan and smuggled it back to school. When I got home that evening, my sister was equally excited and we couldn't wait to play it. So we listened on our Sanyo tape machine and were soon singing along to the tape at the tops of our voices. We hadn't realised Barbra Streisand was such a good singer. Right. And we didn't have much to do in those days in the evenings, and over the next couple of weeks we virtually played it to death until we knew every single song by heart. At the end of the second week, when the cassette was due to be returned, I renewed it for another couple of weeks. However, by the end of the month, I knew it really did have to go back and I couldn't keep it any longer. The night before I was due to return it, just as I was about to put it back in its case, I noticed that the track labels on either side of the cassette were slightly raised, and if I very gently pulled them, they would peel off. I had a brainwave. I hurriedly found an old BASF blank tape which had been used repeatedly to record Top of the Pops over the years and discovered that these labels were also easily removed. So I removed them and replaced them with the Barbra Streisand ones. This was now the cassette I would return in the case and keep the original one for myself. I didn't want to be too dishonest, however, so I decided with the help of my sister's tape deck, I would re-record the original Barbra Streisand on the old BASF blank. This involved putting the two cassette players side by side on a chair in the sitting room, pressing play on one and play and record on the other. As soon as I was assured that the machines were running smoothly, I slowly and carefully backed out of the room. After a few minutes, however, I couldn't resist just going back into the room to listen as the tape played. My foot started tapping, and before I knew it, I started to sing along to the music. My sister soon joined me, and before we knew it, I had taken on Barbra Streisand's vocals and she, the more falsetto, Barry Gibb. I'm sorry to say we got somewhat carried away, and we then sang along to the whole tape at the tops of our voices. At the end of side one, as the original tape ended, I realised that the blank I'd put in was a 120-minute tape, and there was at least another 30 minutes to fill up, so I just left it running and we left the room. I did the same on side two and then played it back quickly to hear how it might sound to the next person who borrowed it. And I'm sorry to say that the production was not studio standard, and it included the additional sound effects of doors banging, voices calling, and dogs scratching and breaking wind. I forgot to mention that my dog was also in the room at the time. However, it was getting late and it was the best I could achieve. I sheepishly returned it the next day to the library, apologising to the librarian for the length of time I'd kept it. For months afterwards, I avoided the library if at all possible and certainly never ventured near the cassette carousel. So, Simon, I now seek forgiveness from the library for what now I now appreciate was unauthorised borrowing of the cassette. But more importantly, I seek forgiveness from all the Barbra Streisand lovers in my local area in Ireland who borrowed the cassette after me and must have listened in wonder and shock to the quality of the singing and added sound effects from the door and from the dog. I'm sure to this day there must be some people who think she's rubbish and highly overrated. To conclude, I suppose I must even seek forgiveness from Barbra Streisand herself for misrepresenting her in this way. A splendid recollection from that discovery that your local library actually lends you cassettes and records, and then you can record over them, and you're not supposed to do any of that. Sister Rebecca, what do you think?
Oh, it just brings me back. I love this confession. Remember queuing at the record shop every weekend to buy your single of the week?
Yes.
And the cassette thing, I love it. I think it's great, actually. She added extra sound effects onto this Barbra Streisand cassette. And, good for her in a way. I suppose, on the other hand, she was a bit sneaky and a bit selfish. I can't really decide on this one because I love the confession so much. Yeah, I feel sorry for the people who took it out after her, but I think because she told the story in such an amusing way, I'm going to forgive you, Bridget.
OK, Bridget, you're done on that one now, Mother Superior.
Well, I think this is, as a Barbra Streisand fan myself, I think I would have got really upset if I'd have gone to the library and taken it out and found that it wasn't Barbara at all, that it was somebody yelling and screaming. And also, isn't it a little bit illegal that? I mean, you're not supposed to
All of this is... The whole thing is illegal.
You're not supposed to tamper with the goods, are you?
Whatever. The whole point of the radio homes is whatever, we don't mind anymore.
The whole point
Remember,
of the
home taping is killing music.
Yeah.
Remember,
yeah.
it killed music. Remember that?
Did you have that sticker on your card?
No, it was
car.
nonsense.
No. Yeah, so it's all a bit. It's all a bit illegal, and I'm sorry to point that out, but it is. And I like Barbra Streisand, and you're looking very cross with me, so I'm just going to say I don't forgive you.
There you go, bringing the law into it again.
Yeah.
Brother Matthew.
I'm going to forgive, and I'll say why, is that I think that the next person to take the tape out, and indeed every subsequent person to take the tape out, will have think that they stumbled across some demo track of Babs and Barry belting out whatever they were belting out, and so thought to themselves, this is an amazing find. I thought I was just going to get the studio version, when in fact, and isn't that a dog breaking wind in the background? Who'd have thought Barbra Streisand would have allowed that in the studio? So I think they thought that they stumbled on some very rare demo track, and for that reason I'm going to forgive, because they loved it.
All right, okay, so I reckon we might get library confessions.
Yes.
Recording over stuff that you shouldn't do because it's against the law.
Home taping is killing music.
Yeah, one day it will.
One day.
They were our confessions for this week. Who did you forgive, if anyone? More confessions for you live on Monday. We'll see you then.
Thanks for listening to this BBC Radio 2 free download. Now, why not try more?
Jazz for me, I guess, is improvisation.
My pick of the best in rhythm and blues.
Music from Richard Thompson, Chris Wood and Pentangle, amongst many, many others.
All at the BBC Radio 2 website.